Hey, welcome back to the stash. You know, I think I might truly hate myself, because at the time of writing and recording this video, I'm running off only 2 hours of sleep and have just finished a long shift at the Daily Bugle, so what's a better way to spend the rest of my afternoon and night than sleeping? Well, clearly not reading the latest Amazing Spider-Man issue. And just before we continue, yes, I will be looking at Shadow of the Green Goblin very soon, okay? I need you to be a bit more patient with me, and yeah, hopefully very soon. Now, if you remember last time, I found the main story just pretty much okay at the very best, and that's generous still. Minus the Paul story, it was probably the first time in forever an ASM book was harmless, and Zebwell seems to have this thing where he actually puts in a slither of effort into the book whenever Tombstone's the sole villain. Speaking of villains, there's one person who I don't call out nearly as much as I should for when it comes to the demise of Spider-Man comics, and that has got to be Nick Lowe, the editor of the books. It's known in the fandom by now that in short, he is a massive, moronic, selfish, painfully tone-deaf loser. This guy thrives off telling us, the fans, how wrong our opinions are on the book, with him saying multiple times within the letter section we're just reading it wrong and don't understand anything. In some cases as well, he just completely dismisses the entire letter. Like recently, a fan from overseas wrote this essay-long entry talking about all this rightful concerns and criticisms of the book that he has, and all Nick said back was something like, "We'll tell Spidey he has an invitation to whatever country he was from. Thanks for reading." It's so incredibly insulting on so many levels, and I, for one, I'm very sick of this weirdo in charge who did that creepy Wolverine Mary Jane Ultimate Spider-Man story. But guess what? It manages to get worse. When I tell you that his letter response within this comic proves not only that he fundamentally understands nothing about the character that is Spider-Man, but also that Nick Lowe is a complete embarrassment to the books, who's a major part to why everything is as bad as it is now. So join us today as we go over the latest installment of this woeful series, The Amazing Spider-Man issue 57. So our story begins within Rikers Island. Tombstone walks over to the booth. He's got a visitor. Once there, he sees the hero of this comic, the spectacular Spider-Man, waiting for him. He wants to discuss business. Tombstone somewhat obliges and asks whether Janice going against him was his doing. Spider-Man replies with, "Sure, I might have talked to her, but that choice was all on her own." But then, much to Spidey's surprise, an officer uncuffs Lonnie, for he has somehow made bail. Later, a furious Peter Parker finds Michelle, Tombstone's lawyer, and no matter what he says, no matter what anger he feels, he simply can't do anything about it. Michelle says it was her job to get him out, so she did. She then leaves before things escalate even more. Peter is anything but happy. Meanwhile, at the apartment of Randy Robertson and Janice Lincoln, the pair are going through quite the stressful time. Janice, packing Randy's clothes as fast as she can, explains that she knows that her father Tombstone wouldn't put a hit on her, even though she betrayed him in a way that in his line of work is unforgivable. So instead, he must go for the heart. He must target Randy to get to Janice. Then at Gracie Mansion, home of Mayor Cage, the three heroes all converse about the recent events revolving around Tombstone going out on bail. They legally cannot go after Lonnie, especially since Luke Cage is the mayor, and it would ruin the oath he swore to uphold. Spider-Man suggests that maybe Janice should go with Randy for safety reasons. However, She-Hulk mentions that she's the most integral part of the whole case, and without her, Tombstone wouldn't be put away. The three accept that Lonnie will know they're moving, and he'll be ready for anything. So our heroes have got to send everything they got to prepare. Sometime later, the White Rabbit is with the rest of Tombstone's crew as they get ready for the big play. Lonnie has chosen White Rabbit to be the one to lead the hit, even with her conflicted morals, because the two are friends. They've fought side by side, but that doesn't concern Tombstone. He's the boss, and this is her job. Randy and Janice are now on the move. They've got police protection everywhere, as well as a certain wall crawler keeping a close eye in case anything seems off. But meanwhile, underground, White Rabbit and Digger prepare for the interception. A loud roar from the train echoes, growing louder and louder till suddenly, with the help of Digger lifting the tracks, it bursts through the roads, colliding into the escort. It's go time. Spider-Man leaps off the truck and goes straight into battle. As he's locked into the fight, the remaining members of the Syndicate rush to their targets. When they rip the doors open, Rabbit has a gun pointed right at Randy and Janice, but then she stops. She warns them of everything Tombstone set up, and tells them they have to leave the city now, for her father wants his own daughter dead. Then in true Silver Age fashion, She-Hulk removes her disguise to reveal that Janice never left with them. But then, it all starts to become clear. Tombstone knew all along. He knew White Rabbit wouldn't be able to go through with the plan. He knew that Janice would have been an easy target this way. She-Hulk rushes to get Spider-Man. They've got to go now. But meanwhile, back at the apartment, gunshots go off with a haunting scream filling every room. Janice panics. She tries to find her costume before it's too late, but then a voice she knows all too well calls for her name. She slowly turns around. She sees Tombstone, her father, covered in blood, ready to add another victim to his long list of deceased. Well, we actually have an issue that flows well from start to finish. I'm shocked, I tell you. This story is easily better than Gang War and whatever else Wells managed to pump out in his time as the writer of ASM. Not to say it's good or anything, I still find this story in terms of quality pretty basic, and overall it's still nothing special. However, in a long list of absolutely horrid comics, this is probably the most bearable one out of the bunch. Zeb did an almost decent job of actually keeping the tension feeling somewhat real, and I actually haven't felt that in a long time from an ASM book, so it was a welcoming feeling. I got to admit though, it does feel like Zeb Wells is trying to make Tombstone more of an A-lister when it comes to Spider-Man foes. If anything, it doesn't really help with the assumptions that he literally only knows the character from the Raimi movies and the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, because nearly every issue he writes proves that theory, especially considering he's ignored the canon of the 616 multiple times just to follow the Raimi movies lore, as well as this attempt in having Lonnie control all the gangs in New York to make him more like his cartoon big man counterpart. What we really need is to get a writer to come in who actually has done their homework, someone who actually knows the lore, someone who actually cares. Nick Lowe, the current editor of the Spidey comics, has basically just said what we all knew was true about the books ever since One More Day. He's confirmed that the people in charge, himself included, generally just don't understand anything about this once great comic series, and it's obvious that ever since One More Day, the Spidey office are just absolutely terrified of the thought of allowing Peter to grow up and change, and now they've finally admitted it. And so just before we continue, I will read out both letters just for the overall context of the situation so you can really understand how bad it all is. So the fan letter starts with the release of issue 53, I feel that this arc is the perfect microcosm, a pure distillation of the problems with the creative direction and ideology behind Spider-Man ever since 2008. He continues with Peter has just turned evil for the third time in less than a year, the second time in only 4 issues, and all I'm left wondering is, haven't I already seen this before? This arc? Hell, the whole run by Zeb feels like we're just going around and round in circles, and that feeling extends to the nearly 500 issues prior to this moment as well. Nothing has really changed in Peter Parker's life in all the time that he's still just as much of a broke loser who keeps pushing away the people around him as he was immediately following One More Day. All the while, everyone else in Marvel gets to grow and change. Hell, even Venom is a responsible father now. Why isn't Peter allowed to see any developments of his own like he had done for decades between 1962 and 2007. I speak for many millions of fans of Spider-Man when I say I'm disappointed with this creative direction, and it's why I'm so supremely happy with the new Ultimate Spider-Man book, because it just feels like the true continuation of Stan, Steve, and John's ideals for the character and his growth. I really hope things will change soon, and so do many, many others. Now that is a very valid, very good letter to send in to the creative team. A lot of constructive feedback about, especially with the direction of the books, and even the way that deep within its roots, Stan, Steve, John, how they always knew what Spider-Man was about, what this series was about, the continuation, him growing up, him evolving. And so what did Nick have to say back to that? Well, he responds with, sorry ASM hasn't been doing it for you. As for Peter turning evil, it was part of an ongoing story thread we were working on that only seemed to have ended in ASM 35. If it didn't work for you, that's a bummer. It worked for us and a lot of fans. As for your bigger question, would Stan, Steve, and John Romita Sr. want Peter's life to develop? I'm not sure and I can't speak for them. I certainly don't think they had a definite plan for such development, as they had no way of knowing this book would last decades past their time on the book. I've come to think that Spider-Man growing, aging, and developing his life along with a reader in ASM isn't the way to go. I believe that Spider-Man belongs to all fans and all generations, and should mostly be as universally relatable as possible. Why just mostly? Well, we should still do stories like Superior Spider-Man, Worldwide, and beyond that drastically change Spidey, but then come home to the core of Spider-Man. That said, we at Marvel contain multitudes and have offered many stories of Spider-Man growing and aging beyond his archetypal core, if that's more your thing. I do think it's bold to claim that your view is one representing multi-millions of fans' viewpoints on how Amazing Spider-Man should work as a comic with no way to prove it, but you do you. This entire thing is honestly so baffling to me. To not let your character grow or change in any way, shape or form ruins the whole purpose of writing a narrative. It not only contradicts the entire point of serialized storytelling, but it also makes using the format completely useless. And, you know, to make it even worse, it doesn't end there, because for him to claim that Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and John Romita Sr. didn't have any plans for Spider-Man to grow proves not even he, the editor, the guy in charge, has read a single comic book of Spider-Man. Because let me tell you for a fact, if there's one thing certain about those issues, it's that Peter grew and changed. He started as a high school student to a man in college, he got a job, his own place, he made friends, he started to date, he even dealt with such monumental hardships which in itself caused him to grow as a person. Like, If This Be My Destiny, the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 2, the magazine, with Stan Lee, John Romita Sr., brilliant Green Goblin story, Spider-Man No More, issue 59 of ASM, which had the first kiss between him and Gwen, the drug story, and even the death of Captain Stacy. All of these stories prove him wrong. He hasn't read a single comic book. Also, really, the whole I do think it's bold to claim that your view is one representing multiple millions of fans' viewpoints on how Amazing Spider-Man should work as a comic with no way to prove it. I love how hypocritical Lowe is for discrediting this guy's view on how Amazing Spider-Man should be under the logic that there's no way to prove that's what millions want when using the same reasoning. Lowe's stupid outlook should also be discredited for being just as biased, if not more so, as it's a highly contradictory view to what ASM was for more than 5 decades before he took the reins, and equally impossible to prove to be a popular one. He's just such an incredible idiot. An honest critique that does in fact speak for millions of Spider-Man fans is brushed aside with arrogant deflection once again. Meanwhile, Ultimate Spider-Man sits comfortably as the #1 seller comic, only bested by the relaunch of X-Men, whilst Amazing fell at the 12th place. For a title that was the best seller for years upon years, it should serve as an alarm that maybe, just maybe, people don't like this crap. And what is it that Ultimate did that just made it sell so well? It gave the readers what they wanted to see for years on end. It's not rocket science, it's actually pretty simple. It seems like these people never actually went to elementary school, where they literally teach you that one of the 3 essential parts of any story is the ending. He literally said, "I do not think that Spider-Man evolving as a character is what he should be." I mean, does he realize how massively stupid that statement on itself is? Imagine if we applied that logic to any other story. If Michael never became the Don, if Anakin never redeemed himself, if maybe Dick Grayson never became Nightwing. It ruins it. You can't just keep a character in a stasis just because you don't want them to move on. And the worst part is, Peter grew up, he evolved, but thanks to Lowe and the Spidey office, they de-evolved him to a whiny man-child. Newsflash, Peter has to eventually marry someone. He eventually will have to have a child. He'll eventually grow old. Look at the growth between Strange and Clear. These 2 characters started as single, fell in love, and eventually got married. It's a process that took decades of real time for it to finally happen, but it did, just like Peter and MJ. The kind of logic Marvel editorial applies to Spider-Man goes against the very essence of storytelling itself, and it's why with them still in charge, things will never change. If you have any self-respect as a Spider-Man fan, you will not buy this book. These people hate you and your favorite hero. They do not deserve your hard-earned money, and this response from the editor himself proved everything we've been saying for years to be true. Nick Lowe, you are a disgrace, an absolute disgrace to Spider-Man comics, a cancer upon this once great title, and I for one cannot wait for the day you finally leave this book so we can start to rebuild again after all the immense damage you and your group of morons have done. Spider-Man was already in the grave after one more day, but you just buried him along with the title of ASM. I hope you're happy, because me and millions of other Spidey fans, much to your disbelief, are anything but joyful for having to put up with your shit for so long.